And I thought naively, and I've had so much therapy over the years for various reasons, but this time it was my choice to go. But I still at that point was like, I'm going to go here, and I'm definitely going to work through everything, and then I'll come out of it, and that will be me, and everything will be sorted. And I was there for a year, and the main thing I learned after that year was, oh, it's never ending. It's a constant communication. It is a constant negotiation. But what this has given me is the right tools to help me along the way. I now have tools that I can use so that I can have these conversations with myself, and I can ultimately change the paradigms that I've sort of set up, the belief systems. It's belief systems, and you have to spend time sort of fact-checking that and really kind of making the adjustment. And so it really was for me about changing my personal beliefs about myself that were wholly in complete untruth and not factual, and where a child's relationship to situations that had happened in childhood that had caused me to believe those things that weren't true. So I still had the mind of a 9-year-old, 10-year-old child rather than, a grown man. I hadn't evolved past that response.
So welcome back everyone to another episode of the Mrs. Brain Trainer podcast. This week's guest, I spoke to actor and voice coach Kirsty Strain. I know Kirsty from working with her on a one-to-one level. She is an absolute phenomenal voice coach. However, you may have came across Kirsty on your screen. She's a very accomplished Scottish actress. You may have seen her on shows like Outlander, Burnistoun, Rebelcity. She's also starting to make her own short films, and so I can't wait to see what she creates there. We had the most authentic, enlightened, chat in this episode. She is a very resilient person. She drops so many life lessons in this interview. As an actor, you have to pick yourself back up and bounce back and don't dwell on the knockbacks, and she has developed some really pretty cool techniques and ways that's allowed her to do that. Kirsty herself is, she's not always been that way. She experienced an illness as a child. She struggled with mental health, went to therapy over the years. She's a massive promoter of self-care and taking responsibility for your own life. Kirsty is a huge Rocky fan, and that's something I didn't know about her until this episode. She even says that she liked Rocky 5, but she's used that philosophy, that mentality to get back up, to bounce back, to keep going, to follow your dreams as a philosophy throughout her life, which I think is amazing. Kirsty and I talk about what we think would be a good thing to implement in the school systems, what would help our young people, being authentic, speaking your truth, which will then stop leaving people in isolation thinking that it's only happening to them, whatever it may be. So if you enjoy this episode, guys, it would really, really help if you could leave us a rating, leave us a review, and get this into the ears of somebody out there who might just need to hear this information to kind of move forward in their lives. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed doing it. So hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Mrs. Brain Trainer podcast. This week's guest is the amazing Kirsty Strain. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm grateful for the sunshine while we have it.
I was just honestly that's what I'm saying. It's roasting here in Scotland, in Glasgow. So thank you so much for taking some time out today to come on and explore, everything and anything.
Oh boy. No, I'm excited to be on. I've been listening to other episodes and conversations that you've had, and I've really enjoyed them. So I'm really looking forward to our chat.
Yay! So obviously I know you through the Power Girls group that Iona runs, and I've also came to you on a one-to-one basis for voice training. So for people that don't know you, would you like to just give a little intro to who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a voice coach as well. And I've been working mostly acting has been the most long term. That's been the most long term. And then in the last few years, I've sort of branched out a little bit and taken my training into other avenues, and voice coaching has become a bit more taking up more of my time. I think it really got busy for me during this period of change because I was able to coach online. I was doing that anyway, but it kind of built up and grew a bit more, and I've sort of expanded in that work in that area as well. I'm still working as an actor, and then filmmaking. I made my first film 3 years ago. And I'm now in the process, finally, after a little bit of a gap, of developing my next script. And we're in sort of the early development stages of that, but I'm looking to kind of move forward with that fairly soon to get my next short made. So basically, because I was speaking to Iona about this as well. We had quite a chat, and she was sort of asking me about these things, and that really got me thinking about how everything kind of came together and led together. And because I started off primarily just as an actor, and what I think all of the work that I do is united by connection and expression. Really, so I kind of look at it from that perspective, that they all sort of lends to each other really well when you look at it from a connection and expression perspective. So
I literally like you just when I think of I think of the word connection. And I explained to somebody yesterday, I was like, oh my god, Kirsty's coming on the podcast and she's in the Power Girls group. And when I describe you, I was literally like, when I'm with Kirsty, I feel a bit like I'm with somebody like Eckhart Tolle or something, because
no.
it's the connection and the matching and the mirroring and the presence, and you're very, very, very present. And I find it absolutely fascinating. I've actually never met anybody who, like, when we're on a one-to-one, I'm like you hypnotise me or something, like, and we're
says that.
You know that I've said to you so many times, like, you should be out, like, you'd be so good at it.
I think the thing with that is because of the work I've been doing as a voice coach, primarily when you're working one-to-one, it's all about connection. And working as an actor as well, that's a huge part of it. You're connecting with the material, the story, the people that you're working with, but especially one-to-one and within voice coaching and presence in particular. Again, that's something that relates overall to every aspect of what I do. And I think because I've been working more consistently, I mean, in the beginning, freelancer, you're kind of in and you're out, and I did a number of other jobs in between being a jobbing actor. But I think now, because of the work that I do alongside my work as an actor is so closely linked, it's brought me to a place of deeper connection over time. I mean, to be compared to Eckhart Tolle, I mean, that's taking it to...
That's the only way I could actually, I was like, that's what it feels like. And I deeply studied him for like 6 years, and wow. That's why I'm like, how is she like so immersed, like, to the point that you are? Because it's really, it must have took years, like you're saying, and it's all sort of a connecting together. But how could you explain people who have maybe never heard of connection and the way that you mean it, and being present as well?
Well, I think from a voice point of view, everything starts with breath. But right away, that's the same in life. And there are a lot of parallels with that. Everything starts with breath and connecting to your breath, but we use diaphragmatic breathing, which is taking your breath into belly breathing, into center, into where your solar plexus is. Most people are in chest breath or they're in throat voice, so they're very disconnected. They're not going beyond chest for sure. So they're not really in their body. Now, it's whether it's voice work or whether it's as an actor, you have to be very present and you have to be in the body. Most people are in their head. We think, and this is, now I take this completely from Eckhart Tolle, so this isn't me. But he talks about the mind, and we identify ourselves with the mind as if we are our mind. But we're not our mind. Our mind is just this supercomputer that runs and helps us be more efficient with certain things. But over time, the mind takes over and ego takes over as well. We are not our ego. But if we are ego-driven, if we are mind-driven, we're not connected. We're very much disconnected from self. So when we connect to, from a voice point of view and an actor point of view, and you're connecting to your breath, it immediately brings you into your whole body. It immediately brings you into center and gives you that sense of being grounded and supported and present. And that's where presence comes from. But then from the spiritual perspective, you are then connecting with your true self, the spirit of the true self. And so there are these parallels between the practical work that I do as a voice coach to help improve the voice from a vocal production perspective, or even with regards to articulation and elocution. But there's another side to that, because speech is physical in nature. It's of the self, and so much of expression and identity is wrapped up in the voice. And so I always sort of bear that in mind, that mind, body, spirit are all connected and they all have a relationship, and we have to kind of be aware of what that relationship is, because it's deeply personal, you know, and the voice is deeply personal, and it's how we identify. And so when we're making changes in those areas, I have to be very careful of the impact that's going to have on the emotional well-being of a person as much as anything else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of, to sum that up, I guess, to sum connection up. It's a bit
amazing.
Like that.
You're really like, it's like is the level of excellence in the, of a voice coach perspective, like you're like a master of it, and I'm like I obviously sit in pure admiration, because it's like, and I think it possibly comes across so rich to me, because you know, it's like not everybody will be teaching the way you do from a present place, but from a, I don't know, I feel like there's an enlightenment about how you teach and how you do things. Actors as well, like I've been around a lot of actors when I did I was an extra for like 7 or 8 years or something. I don't feel like all of them like practice presence.
No, we're in our heads a lot. I mean, I used to be one of those people. I used to be in my head all the time. All the time. I mean, I was the worst for it, because I had real issues with self-esteem. I had really low self-worth. I was incredibly insecure. And my mind was a constant whirl of negative chat to myself. I mean, the level of abuse that I would level at myself, that if I heard that from an outside source, there would be issue with that. You would have to intervene, because it was brutal. And everything I did, I questioned. I was a terrible actor. For years, I was terrible. I look at my early work and when that's dreadful, because I was in my head so much, and everything was about approval and people pleasing. And because and here's the thing, when you have low self-worth, right, and you derive your worth from the approval of other people. But if you don't believe in it in yourself, it doesn't matter how much somebody else approves of you anyway. You don't really believe it anyway. And also you're compromising yourself so much to bend to the will of other people just to get that little nod of approval or to be accepted or to be liked. And so that gets really exhausting, and you're completely disconnected from yourself because you're constantly looking outside yourself for any kind of fulfillment that you can get. So for me, that made me a terrible actor. It made me a deeply miserable person. It made my relationships difficult because I couldn't tell what was an honest, legitimate relationship and what wasn't, because all I was doing was constantly striving to please other people. So I, as an actor, knew I wasn't where I wanted to be, but I knew it was a personal problem. I knew that no matter how many classes I took or workshops or how brilliant my teachers were and everything that they taught me about connection and about moment-to-moment playing and all of that stuff, if I didn't work on this issue that I had, I was always going to be in my head. I was always going to be driven from an ego place, and I was never going to trust my impulses, which is really important as an actor. And I was never going to have a quality of voice that was true to myself and that spoke, have a real honesty or truth or authenticity. So that was something that I had to really go away and work on and deal with. And that kind of brought me back to my work and my practices and how I work because of that. And I think that plays a huge part in why I work the way I work now.
Was there a specific turning point or an event that you were like, enough is enough? Like, did you have to reach an edge until you were like, right, this needs to change?
Well, it's a fascinating thing because I think it was about 5 years ago I just really felt it was really causing barriers for me in progressing in life, and I could just feel this real sort of unsettled sense and I've always had health issues in my health, but I knew that this was impacting my health further. And so I went back into therapy by choice. And I thought naively, I've had so much therapy over the years for various reasons, but this time it was my choice to go. But I still at that point was like, I'm going to go here, and I'm definitely going to work through everything, and then I'll come out of it, and that will be me, and everything will be sorted. And I was there for a year, and the main thing I learned after that year was, oh, it's never ending. It's a constant communication. It is a constant negotiation. But what this has given me is the right tools to help me along the way. I now have tools that I can use so that I can have these conversations with myself, and I can ultimately change the paradigms that I've sort of set up, the belief systems. It's belief systems, and you have to spend time sort of fact checking that and really kind of making the adjustment. And so it really was for me about changing my personal beliefs about myself that were wholly in complete untruth and not factual, and where a child's relationship to situations that had happened in childhood that had caused me to believe those things that weren't true. So I still had the mind of a 9-year-old, 10-year-old child rather than, a grown. I hadn't evolved past that response. So that's the main takeaway for me, was this is constant. And then, so that was 5 years ago. And then during that time, it was a process of change, of self-growth, of self-work, of just practicing self-care, practicing self-compassion, and delving deeper into the areas that I felt necessary and also of interest to me and related to my life choices as well as my career choices. And so it's still a process, isn't it? You're never finished.
Never.
You're never finished. There's always things to work through and negotiate. But as long as I keep a forward momentum, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, I think like life is hard. Like the reality is life is so hard, and it doesn't get easier actually. And the more we do and have and whatever's, the harder it gets, and the more responsibilities. And me as well. Like I think I hit about 27 or something, and I had to question every belief that I had ever been told, or because we're just downloading other people's stuff. Even to this day, there's stuff that, and I even say to my daughter, don't believe even everything I say, because you need to figure that out. But there's people go through their whole lives and they just don't ever question anything, and that upsets me actually. And the brain doesn't naturally evolve on its own. It is something you need to go in and do it manually. But every day I work on myself to this day. People think, why are you so positive? How can you be so, when they hear certain parts of my story, and I'm like, I made myself like this. Like I created this woman on a mission, and it is daily work.
Yeah, and I think for me the biggest realisation was we are not the events that happen to us, or we are not the circumstances. We are not even our actions of the past. That's where we were at the time. That was circumstances that occurred. But that doesn't then say, right, well, that is who I am. We are not that. And there are, I've started kind of even going further than that, going, well, it's not a problem, it's just something that's happening right now that I need to take responsibility for and deal with. Even if it's challenging, right, okay, what's the takeaway from this? What can I do? And I think that's been a big thing for me, because I used to believe that I was my circumstance, because I was extremely unwell as a child, and so my belief system was, well, you are weak. You are weak, you are less than, you are limited. And I used to walk around with those beliefs, but that's where my body was at that time. Not necessarily me as a human being and what my capabilities are or were.
As a wee child, like, we're just kind of about making sense of what's going on in a childlike brain, isn't it? And it's like, you mentioned the word responsibility, and that's okay when you're a wee child, but a lot of us don't. We need to take responsibility for our own lives at some point. And it's so much easier to blame and look outside and act, but actually the very freeing part is, like, my life is my responsibility. And even people that go to therapy, sometimes they come in and think that you've got this wand, and it's like, no, it does take work still, and it takes daily disciplines, and doing it every single, and knowing that it's your responsibility. I think that's so important.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially from a therapeutic sense, if you're going into therapy, it's not that therapist's responsibility. They're there as a guide. They're there to guide you and maybe give you some tools to help. But ultimately, you're going to have to go through the process. You're going to have to work on yourself. And it's not that you go in and like you say, and a magic wand gets waved and the problem gets solved. And it's that kind of... It, for me as well, I'm now at this point, because again I got heavy into Eckhart Tolle again recently, and I was for ages saying, oh, I'm developing a really good relationship with myself, I want to have a really good relationship with myself. And he says in The Power of Now that if you have a relationship with yourself, you are splitting yourself in two. Why not just be yourself? So this was a whole new someone said to me. It's like, oh, so it's not even about changing the way I talk to myself and communicate with myself and have a relationship with myself. I'm supposed to transcend relationships and go into just being, right? Okay. So that's where I'm at in my growth. How do I just be without any chatter at all?
That's amazing. What do you think about my favourite word? My favourite thing in life is authenticity. Like my mentor, when she came into my life, she's the most authentic. There's not one other person quite like her, and she developed that over the years because she could see that she was quite different, and instead of feeling like, oh, there's something wrong with me, she embraced it, and she's loved for it. But she is Marmite. Like, some people can't handle it because it shows up insecurities perhaps that they're lacking, because she's very confident and efficient and what have you. But being authentic, as I age, as I go through like my 30s, I'm like, wow, like this is so the way to live your life, because when you're your true self, like, nobody can take that away from you, and it's such a happy place to be, because you don't need to lie and pretend and hide, and I don't know, there's no you're just you, and that's your greatest gift, to actually give another person the real version of yourself. How do you feel about authenticity, and how does it come into your life as an actor and just a person?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's something I still, for me personally, I'm kind of looking at myself, and it's all about connection again, and establishing that connection. And for me, the greatest artists and the greatest sort of experiences I've had with people are when they are totally authentic. I find that such an attractive quality in a person. I'm really drawn to authenticity in people, and it's like a magnet, just because they're unapologetically themselves. And for me, that was an area of fascination for so long, because I was the complete opposite. I would apologise before I even opened my mouth. My body language would apologise. And so whenever I met anyone who was so unapologetically just themselves and just honest and connected, and basically what I felt it was, or what I've kind of observed from that, is they're not questioning themselves. They're not questioning who they are or what they're doing, or that it's coming from a really honest place. This is who I am. Don't get me wrong. I think even the most authentic people probably question things, question life, but they will still evaluate from an honest place rather than an egoic place, know. And you're around someone who's just so much of themselves. The energy that comes off of them, the vibration, it's just like a magnet to me. I just get really drawn in by that, and I hope that I'm on the path to very much being as honest and as authentic as I possibly can be. It's interesting with me because of the work that I do as a voice coach. I get a little bit of it's interesting because my accent is slightly, that's an interesting area. My voice is an interesting area, because in the past, my voice would change to fit whatever group of people I was with. It would just immediately go somewhere else. And then when I started working as a voice coach, it was important for me to speak a certain way to represent clarity, diction, elocution. That being said, I'm naturally much more Glaswegian. So sometimes when I do interviews, my mum likes to
relate.
Like, what was that? What was that posh voice you were putting on there? What was that? Fancy. So for me, it's kind of like I've come to a place of, right, this is it. This is where I speak from. This is who I am, and I'll anchor in that. And then, of course, I can have the variety and flexibility when it's required for work. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm as heavy Glaswegian as I once was, because no one would come to me for elocution lessons. But that's nothing to say that it's not an amazing accent and it's not absolutely brilliant. And it's just it's just evolved because of the work that I do, that, you know, it's an interesting thing, that debate that we have over accent and voice and identity, and why do you feel the need to change it, or should you change it, or what's that about? And I think only from a presentation perspective, only from the point of view, if I'm doing public speaking, if I'm doing interviews, if I'm doing podcasts, if I'm to have that clarity just for the sake of mainstream, just for the sake of the listener. However, it's not anything against natural, you know, everyday, you know, it's what happens, it shifts. It's just because if I put my at home, and I think what I've come to terms with is that the voice does change depending on environment, depending on circumstance. You know, we all have our telephone voice, we all have our public voice. Well, hello, how are you? And then there's the voice that's the at home voice. I'm like, I'm going to be quiet for 5 minutes. Yes. Honestly, so if I relax, then you know what I mean. That's why I talk my natural kind of place, because it doesn't sound like a voice coach too much. But so if I phone my mum, I'm like, listen, boy, just don't talk to me like that. So I love where I'm from. I'm really proud to be Glaswegian, and it's not that I want to take anything away from that. But I think questions always get raised around that issue, and especially for people who are looking to change their voice, and why are they looking to change it. And I'm very careful with that, because it has to be something that's your choice for a purpose, to serve a purpose. It can't just be because you're worried about what other people think of you. That's no reason to do anything. You know, and it has to be of the self, and it has to be through you. It's not something that you put on. It's not a voice that you put on. It's a voice you connect with and connect to from yourself. And when it comes to softening, what you're doing there is just, you're still Scottish, you're still from Glasgow, but you're softening certain placements for a mainstream listener. If you work, you know, I have a lot of people that work in international business, and you know, they're speaking to people from all over the world, and it's symptoms, meetings and communication that bit easier to be understood immediately. There are people that work in public sectors where they're doing a lot of presentations and interviews and things like that, and again, especially for things like that, because even the musicality of your voice is important. Because if it's not pleasant to the listener won't listen. They're not going to listen. So it's for those purposes and to serve those purposes. It's not to make yourself be identifiable as something other than is authentically you. We don't want that. Don't change your accent or your voice because you're for those reasons of feeling other. No, like that's not a reason at all. If it aids in your work and for those reasons that I've mentioned, that's all great. But then that should be it. It shouldn't ever be for the purposes of pleasing elsewhere.
Yes,
I think that's really important.
Yeah, I relate to obviously so much of that. Every point you made, because when I came to you, I had such a, I don't know what I had, but I was also starting the podcast, and I had issues around voice over the years. I remember somebody, a pal of mine years ago, she moved away and then she came back for a visit, and she spoke like differently, and everybody like so mean, and like, and I've always appreciated I just like the sound of a nice clear voice, and they totally ripped that girl to shreds. They were young, and so even all the times that I would have liked to have worked to my voice beforehand, that kind of a must have been that belief system or that experience definitely affected it. But for my work, like the hypnotherapist, it's all about the voice. And my first positive experience with the voice in that respect was when I went to hypnotherapy school, and literally in the first day, so many people, like a few of them in the class were like, your voice is perfect for this. Oh my God. And honestly, it was so hard for me to take, because I'm like, I had such a negative belief system around voice for whatever, multiple reasons. But yeah, I want to be just myself, but be able, sometimes I think it's a touch of laziness maybe, which I'm working on, obviously. And yeah, I really appreciate a nice sound. I like maybe I'm a bit auditory when I'm listening and stuff like that. But yeah, it's fascinating. Like, the work I've done with you is completely blows your mind. It's like brain training, but with your vocal cords and your tongue and your lips. And I don't know how many times I've laughed during our session, because you need to be present though to do that.
Yeah,
Massively.
it's really about that. And I think the first time people connect or become present or come into the body and go into diaphragmatic breathing, the other thing that happens is that because we store our emotions in our body and we have areas of tension, and in the beginning what we're doing is release work, because we're releasing, we're relaxing. Relaxation is really important to the process as well. So because of that, and because of the disconnect, the minute someone releases and disconnect, well, all that stuff that they've kind of been storing and building and not letting go of, there's a release that happens. And so there's a response, there's an emotive response that happens to some people. Mm-hmm. Some people get quite teary, some people laugh, some people, it just feels really odd. But the one other thing that it is it feels quite vulnerable at first, because you've got rid of all that armour. So we put ourselves through, because posture is really important for the process as well. And what happens is that when we come into alignment, you got my shoulder. But when we come into alignment and we're fully present and we're fully centered, we have no armor. Because, some people will puff their chest right out, or some people will narrow and shrink. And the minute you come into centered alignment, you're very open, because you're opening up to the environment. And you're very much like in a place of connection that you've never been. And so it does feel quite vulnerable at first. And so you kind of have to sit with that and
it
realize.
It was tough. I remember, like, the first couple of times, even though it's easy what you're supposed to be doing, it's you've learned this way of being your whole life, and it's I don't know, it's quite a hard process to just. And it's simple. You just let go, and you just do
let go. I mean, that statement right there, you just let go. And I had to. I mean, the amount of times I would say that to myself, let go, let go. But it was the brain. The brain would stop me. The brain is we run programs all the time. The brain develops a program to say, right, I understand that. That's the response to that, or that's that experience, or we didn't like that, so we don't want that to happen again. So we immediately build up resistance and belief systems. So especially habits, all our habits, even how we respond to certain things, and the belief systems that we have are habitual. And so we are rewriting a program, and the brain is going, what is going on? What is going on? And that's where we meet resistance, because and that's another part of what I'm always saying to people. Oh, no, feel it, don't think it. Got to quiet the mind. And that is one of the most challenging things for people in the beginning, is to quiet their mind and to just be and come into the body and let it be physical in nature. And because the brain wants to be in charge all the time, and it's that gets in the way. I mean, it's not just of the work that I do, but in life in general. If you look at why we don't do certain things or why certain things become challenging. It's more because we get in our own way about it. We have insecurities about it. We have belief systems about certain things. We avoid certain things because of previous trauma that we don't want to experience again. And so it's that relationship that we have with ourselves. And so when I'm sort of saying, like, it's almost like coming back to a center, coming back to a place of complete just being. So how do I do that? How do I do that? Because I've lived this way for so long, and I'm so geared up, and I'm in my head, I'm in my placement, even where tension.
It's not for the want of trying. It's actually something that seems at the time totally out of your control until you keep interrupting it, and just finally it just starts to respond.
So you take your it's about where you take your focus. So in the case of where I work, I always start with taking the focus to your breath. So if all you are is just being with your breath and nothing else, and seeing how long you can just be with the breath and diaphragmatic breathing, and we do it with counting, because that way, again, it maintains focus in that area. And then when we come into articulation, we're just focusing primarily on, okay, let's look at jaw release. Just allow. Don't have any thoughts about anything else. No judgment. I always say that as well. We take judgment. When you work with me, there's no judgment, because judgment is unhelpful. It's negative. It's tension-filled. So we get rid of judgment and we bring in awareness. We just want to be aware of where we are. And I think the other thing that happens when you're starting this work and you're learning something new is, well, I've got to get it right. And I'm here to get results, and I've got to get it right. But immediately, what does that do? It creates tension. It creates effort, which is tension filled. And also, if you're result motivated, you're out of process. And we need to be process motivated. We need to be in process. So you can't be concerned with the result, judging and evaluating what you're doing while you're doing it, because then you're outside of yourself. Then you're just in your head and you're not in your body at all, and you're not connected. But that is such a habitual program that people live with daily, constantly. I need to get it right. If I'm learning something, the harder I work, the more I do, the more I'll achieve it. And in this process, that is completely not the case, because if you overwork and you overdo, you're in a state of tension, you're over-articulating. And so it can't, relaxation, it works the opposite way. You want to relax and settle and drop down and feel and experience. And so I keep saying, your job is not to master or conquer this practice, it is to discover and arrive at this work. And so that takes time in itself, the approach to get comfortable with that, to get used to that, because as human beings, that's not the way society has kind of taught us to operate.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, the work that you do. And where can people find you if they want any help with the voice stuff?
So I've got a website that's just my name, kirstystrain.com. www.kirstystrain.com. Yeah.
Get in touch with her. She's amazing. Did you have any like positive influences when you were growing up, and anybody that sort of inspired, kind of introduced you to acting or anything like that, or was it a natural thing for you?
I think it was really natural, because when I was really, really young, I just had so much energy, and I was really, really playful, and I was very much a mimic. And I think that's where my love of voice came from, because I was such a mimic, and I loved accents and voices and characters, and I was always telling stories. And then I ended up in my later childhood having to spend a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and my granddad was a real cinephile, just loved film and television, and he just introduced me to a whole new world. I mean, all the classics, all the comedy, but then he also liked all the stuff that was happening at the time as well. So I got a really broad range of styles and genres and directors and all kinds of different things. You know, I was introduced from things to Laurel and Hardy and Morecambe and Wise and the Nicholas brothers and Rita Hayworth to Scorsese and, you know, Pacino and De Niro and all that stuff. So it was a real broad mix of material. And it was just brilliant. He had great taste. And so it just opened me up to all these other worlds, all these other stories, all this, you know, life. And he also used to tell me stories about the actors themselves. He would know all this information about where the actors grew up, where they studied, like all this. He just was a mind of all this stuff. And then the penny started to drop. Oh, you could do this for a job. That could be your job. You could, you know. And to be honest, as time went on, I kind of realised I wasn't made for much else. I wasn't built for much else. And so as soon as I could go to drama school, that's what I did. Yeah.
What age were you when you started?
I went to drama school at 19. Everything happened a little bit late for me because I became unwell when I was 9 and I was really ill. Really, really ill for a long, long time. And, you know, I was housebound and bedridden and it was really severely unwell. And so it took a long time, a lot later in life before I could start life, I guess. So I came to things a little bit later. So I first went to college when I was 19.
What has been your favourite role that you've played thus far?
Oh, that's tricky. That's tricky because I've loved so much. I tend not to have favourites because every job I've had has given me something and has been, you know, fulfilling in its own way. And there's definitely people I love to work with time and again. I've been really lucky in that regard of the people that I get to work with. I get to work with the same people quite a lot, which is good. And I've worked in a broad range of stuff. So I've loved all the comedy stuff that I've done. Obviously working on Burnistoun was brilliant. Robert and Ian are just fantastic and to work with. And so that was a brilliant experience for me. And then getting to work on something like Outlander, which is a massive scale, massive thing that is just so popular as well. You know, that was a terrific experience. And then getting to work on something like Doctors, where the pace is really quick, and you're getting to meet new people and kind of see how that operates. You know, so
is there specific roles that you get casted for, like more than others, or is it just varied?
No, I mean, I think I do tend to get more of the sort of gritty characters, the more sort of rough around the edges types, where they're kind of strong yet vulnerable. You know, they've got a bit of bark and a bit of bite, but underneath there's a softness, there's something else that's going on, but they're troubled a lot. I get a lot of troubled characters. When it comes to drama anyway, I get a lot of troubled characters. And then when it comes to comedy, anything goes, you know. The wigs and the styles and anything goes. You never know. I'm not surprised or shocked by anything anymore after working on Burnistoun for 3 series. But I'm up for all of it, and I think that's the thing about it. So, but yeah, in terms of drama, I do kind of get those kind of really more guttural, you know, troubled, going through something, but strong type of edgy type characters.
So very comfort zone pushing, then, like kind of a, you know, I think like the fact that you're up for it, would you say that's a strength in terms of getting jobs and things like that as well? Does it work in your favour, like having the balls to like going for edgy roles and like quite challenging? I
think if you're not challenging yourself, what are you doing? I think going for the jobs that, you know, I think that's something as well that I learned because, as I say, when I was struggling with myself, all my choices were safe. And they were good choices, but I was bored. You know, in terms of my acting choices, and when I was at drama school, and I had my acting teacher actually, you know, had a go at me in front of the whole class eventually, kind of saying, you know, because he was like, you didn't follow that impulse, you didn't follow that impulse, you know, all the choices you made, they, you know, they were good, but they were safe. He said, you didn't come here to be good, you came here to be great, so what are you doing? And it took a lot longer for that to kind of settle. But what I've realised now is that the more something kind of scares you, the more you should go for it and do it, because you will only grow as a person, as an actor, as a performer. You will only stretch yourself in whatever way you can. That's the only way to grow. If you stay within what your comfort zone is, and you'll never expand, you'll never grow, you'll never see how far you can go, really. And I think, you know, I'm looking for any and every opportunity that's going to challenge me and let me grow and be able to see exactly what I'm capable of, and always see if I can be capable of that little bit more and that little bit more.
I love that. Like, I am too. I experienced some trauma a couple of years back, and after it, what it gave me was like, wow, I have this like steel rod running through me, and it's like I became like a fearless person. But kind of when time passes, unless you're actively engaging in doing things that push you, it sort of weakens a wee bit. So I went on this mad mission where I would go to everything and anything that scared me and was comfort zone pushing, and really it's been some of the best experiences of my life. I recently interviewed my mentor. The episode's coming in a couple of weeks, and I said to her, what is the one thing that you wish you knew when you started out? And she said, well, honey, I just wish I knew what I was capable of back then, kind of thing. And you don't know what you're capable of if you're not putting yourself into these positions. And fear means growth, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think for me, fear was a ruler for a long time for me. It ruled me out of doing so many things. It ruled me out of being honestly just truly myself and having a full life, because fear used to rule everything. It used to dominate. And now it's pretty much gone the complete opposite way in terms of I see it much more as a positive thing. You know, never be afraid to do something that you feel instinctively is right for you, because you're concerned with someone else or someone else's opinion, or you're concerned with failure. Failure's a good thing. That's the other thing. I used to have a really negative relationship with failure, and failure now is a really good thing, because how else am I going to learn if I don't make the mistake first? And failure is a commonplace thing, that's a natural thing, and we can't have success without it. You know, we can't bypass it. We can't bypass disappointment. We can't bypass certain things that feel hurtful at the time, but we can't have any of the wonderful, joyous experiences of love and adventure and thrill and everything that's positive. We can't have that. We won't ever have that fully.
It's the belief systems again that comes back to, like, I don't know why, but we were brought up to think that failure was bad, and that you're spending half your life trying to convince yourself and prove that it's not. I'm at a place now where if I was to die, right, touch wood, on my gravestone it would be the word trier, because I have tried everything, and that's it. People might see the word trier as a negative thing, but it's not. It means I'm constantly applying, I'm trying, I've done everything. I've done so many things, made so many mistakes, but they've all got me here to this point with a bunch of experience, stories, and feeling fulfilled, because I tried all the things I didn't like, or, you know, I wasn't good at, or whatever.
For sure. I think if we spend our time avoiding failure, we avoid everything else. You're not living, and you'll avoid success. Hands down, you'll avoid success. Because if you're trying to avoid failure, how can you succeed? You cannot, because how can you grow? How can you learn? It's just,
possible.
And even if you're lucky, right, and you get a bit of success without any failure, I don't think it's true and lasting success.
Nah.
I don't think it can be. And success is an interesting topic in and of itself, because what is success ultimately? And I think personally that it's individual. I think my success and your success is different. Both are equally valuable, but it's about what it means to you. What, and it's about. And I think ultimately it's so simple. We break it all down. It's about our own sense of self, our own life experience. How do we want to experience the world and relationships in life? And are we doing that successfully?
Yeah, I think people come in or you hear people or speak to people, and it's not that they're bad, but it doesn't really interest me how many languages somebody speaks or how many degrees they have. Like I care about how happy they are, and like how much are they just enjoying who they are and living in the here and the now. Because my how I see success is, how do you feel about yourself when you're by yourself? That to me is the thing that I want to be working on all the time and making sure it's good. Because when that's good, everything else is just an add-on. It's just a bonus. I'm as happy in a tent as I would be, in a luxury apartment. It's just.
Yeah, and I think society's got us that way of, the capitalist rule of like, must have more, must tick all these boxes. But if you're chasing something that's outside yourself constantly, as Deepak Chopra talks a lot about object referral and how often we live in object referral. When I get that house, or when I get that car, or when I get that job. But then you get that thing, and then you're on to the next thing you're supposed to get. And none of that is connection. None of that is you being and having a quality of life in the moment. Real joy, I think, comes from the moment that you're at. There only is now. Only is this moment. Past is gone. Can't get it back. Can't change it. Future's not here yet. Why anticipate it? Because how present can you be especially if you're like another person, and you're having a conversation with them? How present can you be with them if you're constantly thinking about, I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have done that, and that thing I did last week was shocking, or you're sitting there going, oh my God, what's going to happen next week when I've got to meet that other person, and blah, 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 blah. Where are you? You're never having a real experience of life right now. That's all there is. You might not get to next week. So, not to be pessimistic, I hope everybody does get to next week. But we do, and also, and not to be morbid on that sense of the topic of death, but people talk about death like with such negativity, like it's a terrible thing. Let's not pretend death doesn't exist and be really shocked and upset when someone dies. And it's kind of like, but if we spoke about it more, we'd appreciate life more, we'd value each other more, because we know it's precious and we know it's limited. But we take for granted that it's going to go on forever because we don't want to believe in the end. But really, if we understand that it will arrive at some point, then we make sure every moment counts.
Yeah, after I went through losing my son, I don't think there's any bigger lesson than life is short. And it really put things into perspective for me. And I think that's when I really started my path to authenticity, speaking my truth, draining the swamp, getting rid of every negative, well, as much as possible. I don't live in a bubble where everything's always happy. Like, shit happens to me all the time, like every day, like technical stuff. But it really, really rung home. I was like, wow, I have so much that I want to do in this world in terms of not gain and get, but I've got so much in me to give type of thing. Yeah. And I was like, I need to, start. It really made me apply myself more to who I want to be and my daughter and just everything in life. But yeah, life is short. I wish more people like really took that on board and understood, because we're nothing but a drop in the ocean. Although I do plan to live till I'm like 150.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. But I think it's like, if we look at it if we give it the positive spin instead of the negative spin and go, we've got this time right now, let's embrace that. Let's embrace the relationships we have here and now. So that in those moments of real grief and pain, we can share and connect with each other, and be there for each other, and value each other, and value what we have, And I think, and it's about never taking for granted anything, especially relationships and connection, to each other, because what are we without relationships with each other?
I hate how people they think they'll do all that later.
Tomorrow.
The diet starts Monday. The donuts stop, the gym starts. Like, it's always another day, but sometimes that's definitely not a done deal.
No, I'm terrible, because I love all the Rocky films, right? So I run Rocky quotes in my head. I practice the Rocky philosophy of life, and that one always comes up for me from Rocky 3, when Rocky's grieving over Mickey's death and Apollo's trying to train him for this rematch, and he's like, "Oh, we'll get it tomorrow," and he shouts at him, he goes, "There is no tomorrow! There is no tomorrow!" So sometimes when I'm like, I'll do it tomorrow, I've got to go, "There is no tomorrow!"
You've got that wee voice.
You've got that voice going, "There is no tomorrow."
Oh, I think I'll take that on. I quite like that.
Rocky is life. It gets me through life.
I relate to that, actually. Like, I love that story of how he never gave up, I suppose, and people who don't give up arrive. That's what I've learned in life. I've never gave up. Like, as I say, if you could put a name on it, be it you're a trier. Like, I deviate and a pivot and I try different things, but it's that never giving up. And then look what happens. Like, he's such an inspiration to the whole wide world. Like, who doesn't know who Rocky is?
I mean, I think that film in particular, that's a phenomenon. The fact that, the way it was made and how he fought to play the part and to get it made, and they had to make it really under budget, and then the phenomenon that it became, to the fact that it's worldwide and it's known. And yeah, the rest of the franchise is great. I mean, I love all the films, even 5. I love them all. But the first one is in particular just such a brilliant film that stands the test of time. And I think it's because it speaks to, that underdog thing.
Everybody loves a good underdog story, don't they?
And going the distance and all of that. But also at its heart, it's a love story. People think it's a boxing film. It's not. It's a love story.
It's totally a love story. Kirsty, in being an actor, right, or just, in all kinds of different life, but being an actor, I think, I know quite a lot of actors, and they seem like you get a lot of knockbacks, a lot of no's, even though people only really see the wins as well. But I was wondering if you could shed some light on how you're like, obviously a very resilient girl. Like, you've pulled yourself up from the place you were and completely turned it around. What is it? Is there one, not just one thing, but if there was a thing that you could say helped massively in building resilience, being able to take no's on board and still, do you know what I mean? Actors just keep going back and back and back. What can you get into a bit about that?
Well, I'll use Sylvester Stallone as an example, because he says reject rejection. He always says reject rejection, and he says that he hears rejection as someone blowing a giant bugle in his ear to keep going. Like, every no is like All right, okay. So also in Rocky 3, still Rocky 3, we're still going Rocky 3. When he's fighting Clubber Lang and Clubber Lang's belting him and he's like, is that it? Hit me again, hit me harder. That's what you got. My mother hits harder than that. And there's something about that, okay, you've just, there is the moment and there's always the moment. I think for me it's gone easier because before I used to take it all really personally. I used to take it as me. That fed the message for me, that I'm crap message. It was like food. It just fed that whole belief system for so long. But then as that paradigm shifted and my beliefs about myself shifted, so did my relationship with rejection. And suddenly it was not personal at all. It's an industry and sometimes you're right and sometimes you're not. And even in life with other things, when things knock back and you get knocked down, what are you going to do if I stay there? You know, I've always got a cut-off point. You know, it's less and less now. I mean, I used to wallow, but I don't go in for wallowing anymore. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's, what are my options here? Let's get matter of fact about it. What do I want? How do I feel? And what is helpful for me in this moment? It's not helpful for me to wallow. It's helpful for me to look at, how can I learn from that? What can I take from that? Okay, next, thank you. Next, on to the next thing. What's next? And the other thing I realise is that if I'm rigid to an outcome, I'm not open to alternatives. I'm not open to opportunity elsewhere. And sometimes it's happened that way. Sometimes I've been rejected from something and I've been really disappointed and miserable. But then something else has come along that had I got the other opportunity, I wouldn't have been available for that. And so being open to opportunity, have your objective, have your intention of where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve, what you want, and then trust in the process, and whatever outcome happens. And it means that you're open to other possibilities. But if you're rigid to that one achievement or that one thing, that's going to be really hard to pick yourself up from, to then reassess. But if you're just kind of open and flexible, okay, that's obviously not the way this is meant to go. What's my alternative? I now have to have acceptance of that, take responsibility and say, right, I'm responsible for looking for what the next way to solve this is. If I'm not getting that job, what's the next job? What's the
real positive sort of a way of looking at things as well to protect yourself?
Yeah, well, just like, what's the point? What's the point in sitting there miserable? They don't like me, they hate me, oh shit, what I do? None of that's true, first of all, because you've got to fact check it. I love fact checking things because I used to, first of all, I was a really bad auditioner. I was really bad because I was apologetic from the minute I went in. I was nervous, whatever, and I still booked jobs, unbelievably. But what I've started to realise was that when I didn't get certain auditions and I would do that whole thing of, well, they think I'm rubbish, so they're probably never even going to see me again, blah, 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 all that rubbish chat that fed the paradigm. If you fact check, I was like, well, if that were true, you wouldn't have got that job and you wouldn't have got that job. And that person wouldn't have asked to work with you again. They've worked with you 3 times now. Do you honestly believe that they think you're crap? Even though they've chosen to work with you 3 times now or whatever. You've got to fact check what you're telling yourself about the outcome. And you've got to also look at, well, what does that mean for you, not getting that thing that you wanted? Okay, you really wanted it, but doesn't that mean that there's an opportunity for a different experience elsewhere?
It's just pointing you in the direction. It's just showing you what you kind of are looking for.
Because there's nothing you can do about that outcome. That outcome is what it is. It's done. So all you're doing, if you're clinging on to that, feeling miserable, is you're just feeling miserable. And there's not, who wants that, you know? So I would sort of say, get out of that mindset as quickly as possible. Let go of the mind altogether, stop the chatter, and just be like, right, what's next? What's the most positive thing I can do with myself and my time right now?
I like the idea of the cut-off point as well. Like, allow yourself, if you, even if say you do get into a pure tizzy, right, you can allow yourself to feel like that for like 10 minutes or like maybe an hour or whatever for some people, but do not be staying there.
No, take a day if you need to. Take a day if you need to, but at the same time, find something within that day that gives you a bit of life back. You're right in the sense that we don't ever censor your feelings. I'm not saying that at all. Whatever you feel, you've got to acknowledge it and let it pass through. Acknowledge it and heal it and let it go, because the worst thing you can do is dismiss your feelings, because then they just hover around and stay there and eat away at you, and that's worse. Fester. And that all feeds, that's all fuel to the whatever the negative belief systems you have, that's all feeding that's all fodder for that little inner critic. You know, we all have the inner critic, which is the ego, I think, and it's not that you'll ever be devoid of ego, it's just about how you negotiate with your ego, I think.
I think as well, like the inner critic or the fear thing, a lot of the times it's just our wee brains trying to keep us safe. So we're built for survival. It's always going to go to the negative first, because as humans, unfortunately, that's just the path most travelled. So it's really just, is this dangerous? You know, is this whatever? And just you're bouncing to default as soon as a bit of stress or a bit of a curveball sort of a hit you in the face. But ultimately, I believe that it fears love, because see if something's trying to protect you and not want you to, you know, be scared to try, then that's a kind of act of love, isn't it? And it's just about saying, right, okay, I'm now 34. I have different coping mechanisms. Maybe when I was 5, that was the route to go to keep me safe in a volatile environment or whatever it might have been. However, I now know how to do A, B, C, and it's just renegotiating, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think as well, when we're children, everything seems larger, and I think you feel things more deeply, and you take things on board way more when you're a kid. You know, certainly from my perspective, like being really unwell as a child and not knowing what was wrong with me, and my whole mental health being questioned for about 8 years, that ingrained in me to question myself, and that's where the sort of the trauma of that, of being isolated and different and also really unwell and not knowing what's wrong with you and why it's happening, you take it as, well, I must be being punished for something, I'm a terrible person, and all of a sudden that language grows legs. It starts off as a tiny little thought, as a tiny little thing, and then it manifests and grows and grows and grows. Like if you think about fear as a child, and the things that, you know, when we get scared of the dark and the imagination runs wild, and it's a bit similar when we try to make sense of certain things, it just grows legs. It just grows, you know, from the child's imagination or the child's response just really expands. So by the time we're adults, we've got these belief systems, and we're like, how did we get here?
Some of the things I'm like, I can't, like, when maybe things my mum said or whatever, I'm like, how do you get to that? You just believe it and don't question it. It's insane. And I always am teaching people to practice being in the present moment, because that's when you're interrupting those old patterns, and then you're choosing how you want to feel, what you want to do, how you think, and you're not in that reactive state of all the beliefs that you've gathered over the years. It's so fascinating. I could delve into beliefs literally. But what is one thing that you wish you knew when you started out as an actor, as a young female, as a teen, or whatever? Take it whatever way you want.
I think the thing for me, it really is to do with self-worth. I think because I didn't have that for so long, and I think the difference that it makes when you practice self-care and you practice self-compassion, and realizing that you're not you're not doing that in a selfish way. It's not that you become selfish.
Mm-hmm.
You're just giving yourself enough to sustain yourself so that you can be there for other people more. You're able to give way more. You're not running on empty, and you're not. And this being disconnected, this sort of doing everything to please everyone else, for approval from elsewhere. If you that sense of self-acceptance and that's where real authenticity comes from. You've got to take care of and nurture yourself. It's really important because it's no one else's responsibility to do that. And that way you're not running on empty, and that way there's more to give, and that way when difficult things happen, you're able to sort of see, well, that's something that's happened, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean because I failed at that I am a loser or a failure, or that's the language that I tell myself. I was like, oh, that didn't work out. And that's not of me. And I think that's a really big thing, because I think young people now, with the way life is going with social media and everything else, they're constantly looking for the likes and the followers and the approval ratings, basically. And how are you fulfilling yourself? How are you sustaining yourself? You've got to be able to sustain yourself and be responsible for how you feel about yourself. I think if I could have worked through that sooner, my life would have been very different, but it wouldn't have led me to where I am now. So acceptance is paramount. Acceptance of the moment we're in. Acceptance of what has been. Forgiveness is another really important one. And I think it's that. I think it's connection always to self and to others on an honest level.
I love that. Even the kids recently, obviously the big dramas of the exam results because of the whole lockdown thing. Like I've said to so many people, those results do not define you.
No.
The relaxation thing you touched on and the self-care. So many people come to me and they're like, I feel too guilty to take 10 minutes to myself. And I'm just like, wow. And I need to reframe things because they're like, because I've got the kids and I've got this and I've got that. And I'm like, no. When you take that for you, you're even more
for them.
And then they start to go, right, okay, I'm sort of getting it. And then they start applying it and they're like, oh shit, this feels good. This is great. So yeah, I fully agree. Like the self-care, if you can start, who was told when they were wee, go and take a self-care Sunday or, go and meditate. It just wasn't a thing, which I always look for the positives. At least in this generation, there's more of that chatter going about, and the young people are, although they're exposed to, like, if I had to sit and think about the social media aspects, it's just awful. But then I'm like, right, think of all the good stuff that's coming nowadays as well, which I'm hopeful that they take that on board. But it's a big topic in itself for the younger generation.
I think so. I think it's a really hard time to be young with, there's a lot of pressure, in terms of expectation and demand, and
like it's bizarre, it's mental when you think about how we kind of grew up, which I'm grateful for, actually.
Yeah, I know it is. There's just a lot of pressure, I think, and I mean, I would love to see things like meditation introduced into schools, or talk about relationships and self-care and mental health being brought into a school environment. I mean, what is it? There's no point just giving a whole load of information, a whole load of knowledge and saying, here you go, now go and get a job in an industry and that's it. Because there are other aspects of life and they make up a huge part of our lives and our decision-making process, the types of relationships we have, the way we feel about ourselves. A lot of the time, all that negative self-talk that goes on, and all that pressure, and that fear of failure, and that fear of outside, the outer image, how you appear to the outside world. We should be encouraging them to talk more openly about the truth of what their experiences are, and that talking about how you feel is vitally important, and communication is vitally important. All of that kind of stuff, and we really don't allow room for that. And I think it's really a really important thing, because how do you develop coping strategies, and how do you then come to realise that you're not alone in your feelings? Because if no one's talking about how they're feeling, you might think, oh God, I'm the only person that feels like this, and it's awful, and that makes me a weirdo or a terrible person, or and there's all these sort of, that's the kind of chatter that starts to go on. And I think it's just, that's heavy, that's exhausting. And
I feel like the systems are failing the kids. Like, teach them about themselves, teach them about their emotions, teach them about expression. Like, we're in 2020, like, the world's changed. You can, like, there's influencers and all, and nothing gets taught. Like, the schools are so back in the Stone Age, but I am working on this. And I worked with a 13-year-old yesterday, and it was such a joy. It is such a joy when I see a young person come in for help, because and the amount of people that sit in my chairs, and when they're telling me about thoughts or that negative voice, the relief on their face, Kirsty, when I explain that we all have it, even me. And just that, and not just that one thing, it actually can be the catalyst to freedom for that wee person.
And just acknowledgement of themselves, to finally acknowledge everything and get out in the open and realise, actually, I'm okay. Nothing, the earth did not shake. This is, and it's a safe space to talk, and the relief of getting it all off your chest, and the other person who's listening to you accepting and acknowledging you for you. That's a really good starting point. That's a great starting point to open the doors up to change and to healing.
My wee niece does yoga. Well, she's at school now, but when she was in nursery, she came home one day and she was like, I can do downward dog. And I was like, cool, like, show me. And she was like correcting me and everything. But that was my first glimmer of hope that they were kind of moving in the right direction. So fingers crossed. And I'm trying my best. Like, I love to speak with young people, and this is what this podcast is literally all about. It's about putting out information, free information that can hopefully get into the ears of young people. Specifically, I'm very passionate about, because I remember being my younger self, and I've obviously got my daughter, and it's so important that they know that everything's within. Like, all of this change, you don't need to pay for it, you don't need to go somewhere, it's not outside of you. It's everything we've spoke about is an internal thing. And that gives hope, I believe, because if somebody's sitting in they're maybe down in their luck, or they're a wee child, and they don't have literally much at all, that's these podcasts, I think that's the power of them. I think it's absolutely amazing that they can get a wee bit of hope. I hope this is what I'm trying to do here, is provide glimmers of hope.
And to let people know that they're not alone in their feelings or their experiences. I mean, we all go through different things, different experiences, but no one's life. I mean, I think that's the other thing with social media and all that now. We look at that presentation, and we look at other people, and we think they've got it so together. They know exactly. And comparison is also a terrible thing to do. Don't be comparing yourself to others, but that sets a ball rolling, and and it's not even true. And I think to sort of be aware that everyone goes through something, we all have difficulties, tragedies, insecurities, and that we should start normalizing that and saying, That's part of life, and it's not you. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, you're shameful, none of that is true. You're just going through something, and you're feeling something, and you're experiencing something right now. But let's work through it, and let's help you get that to pass through, and build your strength back up, but realize that you're not alone, and that you are acknowledged, and yeah, I think that's it, because I think the isolation factor is huge. People just and shame. We've got this whole shame thing. People feeling so shamed and ashamed of themselves and their feelings. We've got to kind of knock that in the head as well, I think.
This year has been a year where I've really deeply understood the power of speaking your truth. And it's for that purpose, because this year, in lockdown, I took this dream to start a podcast off the shelves. And one of the first things that I wanted to do, and I've just been learning through doing different things, that I used to be so ashamed and embarrassed of having nothing, and a single parent and pregnant at 16. And I told myself bullshit for so many years, but actually this year is the year that I opened my soul to the world, and I put it all out there. And it was like a deep therapy session, but do you know what? I felt like I had a kicking, right? For 3 days. I was I was aching.
Mm-hmm.
But by sharing my story on my weekly group calls, whether it's a podcast, that I'm giving permission to other people. And I posted something the other day, and it said, when you speak your truth, you are freeing someone from their prison. And so whether I feel uncomfortable about crying in front of people or sharing parts of my life, I've just always got that in the back of my mind, that somebody's been through that, going through that, might go through that. And, our truth is our most powerful thing. And if you're ashamed to still speak your truth, it just means you've not actually found your truth. Because now when I look at my truth, I'm like, wow, I got through that, and I'm here. And but when before I was like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing, that's whatever. By me doing it, I know somebody out there would have heard that and thought, something will just click. And it was somebody actually I spoke to, I had the conversation. She went, I've been sharing my story. She said, but only from age 16. She said, I've been cutting out all the stuff that happened beforehand. And after we had a kind of session, she went, actually, there's somebody sitting in that audience that's also been through this. I'm going to start sharing my full truth. And I was like, oh, wow, it's so good. It's so important.
It really is. It's that thing you talk about when you mentioned, it's like when you said the word prison, we do that. We imprison ourselves, and when we hold back and we're not totally honest and sharing. And by doing so, by speaking out, it does sort of acknowledge somebody else who might be good, who might be able listening and say, oh man, that's similar, or oh, I can relate to that, or I never ever used to want to talk about my health, because I was always scared, if how will that affect work, and how will that affect people's perception of me, and everything else like that. And I think it was something that I don't let people see that side of yourself, and don't and that sort of thing of letting all that go and just being, all of those experiences make up us into who we are now, and we wouldn't be who we are without those experiences. And even the most difficult ones, the most painful ones, to work through them makes you a stronger person, rather than what typically happens with people is, oh, I'm so weak that I feel this way. No, you're in a circumstance and you're feeling that way, and by acknowledging it, we're going to work through it. There's another, and I think there's also that thing of some people believe they'll never get out of where they are. They'll never get out of, I'm never going to feel any better. The relief and the peace is never going to come. It will pass. It will come. It will come.
I love that. I think as well what I've found throughout the process of this year of sharing. It's very freeing, it's liberating actually. Nobody can ever come up to me and say a word to me about anything that I used to tell myself that I was so ashamed of or whatever, because I've owned that shit. And on a weekly class on Monday night, somebody on the call shared a bit about his that he doesn't share with anybody. And you know, the amount of people on that call that messaged me to say, wow, you know, because of what he said, it made me unmute my mic and speak, blah, blah, blah. And that's 3 people that's came to me this week, and I shared it with him. And do you know the delight and the joy? He was like, wow, I can't believe that that's happened. Yeah. Like, and now he wants to share more. And I'm like, yay!
Yeah. Changing people's lives. That's what it is. That's connection again.
Yes.
That's establishing connection with people. That's opening up and making a connection and resonating with somebody else. And that's powerful, you know, to embrace ourselves as human beings, to sort of embrace where we are. And the minute you let go, that leaves you open for somebody else to connect with you and relate to what you're talking about. And you never know how whatever you say is going to make a difference to somebody else or not make a difference. But, you know, and the more honest you are, I think the more people actually respond to that.
Well, you've certainly made a difference in my life, and I'm pretty sure, like, you've dropped so many amazing life bombs. It's so cool. And I just thank you so much for the amazing conversation. But we can wrap up here. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to talk about, or anything you'd like to leave with the younger generation or the audience?
I think the only thing I would say is, look, there's no end. Like, I've not got it all figured out, and nobody has it all figured out. We are where we are right now, but embrace that. Embrace who you are and embrace yourself and the circumstance you've got right now. And even if it's in a challenging state, know that there's love there, and there's love. You can find that for yourself. Make sure you love yourself. That's paramount. No matter what's going on around about you, or how difficult and challenging your circumstance might be, because I can't speak to anybody else's circumstance. I really can't, and I would never want to do that. But if you're in a really dark place and your circumstance is really bad, make sure that you're loving yourself and you're worthy of love. You're really and truly, everybody on this planet is worthy of love. Truly. And know that you're worthy. Know that you're worthy of so much. Know that you're worthy of happiness and joy. And let's get working through whatever's going on and find a pathway to that. Make that your mission, to carve out a pathway towards love and fill yourself with as much love as you can.
Beautiful. I love it. You've been amazing. I'm going to set you free to go and enjoy that Glasgow sunshine. But thank you so much again. I can't wait. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. Woo-hoo.
Excellent. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Ashley. See you later. Bye. Bye.
Fills my head, a million dreams are keeping me awake. Think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. Million dreams, it's all it's gonna take. Million dreams for the